These videos are tough to do. Have I told you guys that? It is now 10/19, 29 December 2012. For this take, this session, I have been in front of the camera for about an hour and a half. Already. No joke. No, talking does not come naturally on this subject for me. I have to find my voice, pronounce the words correctly, get my confidence there, and then the words start flowing. Then it comes. But it takes a lot of work to get there. A lot of takes. Not to mention all the pre-production. Days, weeks, research, organizing my thoughts, how to present it. I still don't know if I'm doing it right. How I'm organizing material and presenting it to my audience. For instance, I could have made, 20 mini videos in part 2 of this video series for the greater good. By the way, you're watching the Nutnfancy project. We talked about grief for propaganda's sake. Our values are gone, parenting's gone, reaping the reward of that. That was another topic we discussed. And then truly protecting our children. And can you make us safe? All kinds of evidence presented under each of those topics. Each one of those could have been a mini video. I thought about that. Maybe I should just make 20 videos. But I'm not about making a ton of videos. Getting all, a lot of whatever out there. I don't care. I'm about the message. Presenting it in the best, easily digested way for my audience. And this is what I came up with. But as I go through all these takes, I did all this work, I honestly am sitting here thinking, is it worth it? How many people are actually going to watch this video, for instance? Now in December 2012, I have about, I haven't even checked, like 235,000 subscribers. A lot more don't subscribe, watch TMP. We have millions and millions of gun owners here in the United States. I think it would be reasonable for, on this topic, the Bill of Rights, your personal freedom, your firearms freedoms here in the United States, we should have, 100,000 people watch this video, every single part of this video series. I doubt that's going to happen. But Nutnfancy, they're an hour long. They're more than an hour long. So, you watch movies that are 2.5 hours long. You watch television shows that are an hour long with all kinds of advertisements. This is not interrupted by advertisements at all. Maybe a little one on the front, little one on the back, but nothing in the middle, delivered free of charge. So no, that doesn't fly. Not with me. Guys will sit in front of the video games for 8 hours straight playing it, watch a movie 2.5 hours long again. Listen to talk radio for 3 hours. All kinds of ads there. That demotivates me. I gotta be dead honest with you. And I won't promise you I'll do another video series like this. Even though there will be a great need for such. It just depends on how many people watch it. If there's an audience. And that's all I care about. It's that people are receiving the message. I don't care about advertising or making money off the videos. I care about the message. Getting out there. Defense of freedoms. That's what I care about. If it falls flat, enjoy it while it lasts. This video series, because I may not make another one. I'm just saying. This video series is about truth. Bam! There's some truth for you. And that's another reason I'm making them so comprehensive. Because, who knows, might be my last voice on the subject. Not because I'm being intimidated. Nope. Not because I'm afraid of getting on some list. Don't care. I wouldn't have made the videos I've made to this point if I cared about that. It's because the audience doesn't care. There is no audience for it. If you keep watching, I keep making the videos. There you go. Also, getting this out of the way, forgot to mention this. This is a shell casing from an M1A semi-automatic rifle. Embrace it. Why do I wear that? Because it's an in-your-face to the protectionist. That's why I wear it. It is a symbol of freedom. My personal symbol of freedom. That's why I wear it. I don't care if you wear it or not, but a lot of guys ask me, why do you always have that on? That's why. Especially when I do a pro-freedom video like this. You know, I'm an American, an armed American. So deal with it. That's what I wear, to tell the world that. It's just a little token of freedom in my mind. Also, forgot to mention this in part 2. 14 December 2012, I came out with my first video, predicting the demonization of gun owners, which, as you've seen, has happened. And then shortly thereafter, I came out with part 1 of this video series, For the Greater Good. In part 1, I lamented the fact there were not a lot of pro-freedom voices out there. And there weren't. I was one of the few. A lone voice in the wilderness, or as I like to think, a little ant on the kitchen floor screaming at the top of his lungs in my little sliver of the internet. That's all it is. It's tiny. So yeah, I said that in part 2. I am happy to report that since that time, since that call to arms, at least here on YouTube, that many people have made videos in support of the Second Amendment, personal liberty, and against the proposed so-called assault weapons ban. Thank you for doing that. Good job, and I hope to see a lot more. The more, the merrier. Seriously, this is an important issue, and it is time to mobilize. The old paradigms, once again, do not apply. Okay, it's time to rant the truth. You know, don't strike a middle-of-the-road stance saying we're going to entertain all points of view. No, you are hugely outnumbered as a gun owner. To be honest, hugely outfunded at this point. So you need to be bold and very forthright in your defense of liberty. Join the NRA, contribute to the NRA ILA, join Gun Owners of America, write your congressman, especially in January 2013. There you go. That's what you got to do. Little housekeeping, getting it out of the way as we start part 3. And I got to tell you, I'm going to be watching the views on part 3 big time. If it flatlines, 20,000 views or something like that, I'll just know there's no audience for this. Or it's a very small audience. And so I'll go, don't know if it's worth the work, worth the, the whole thing of me putting myself out there. Is it worth it? We'll see. I'm going to start off part 3 with this. Ready? More hard, in-your-face truth. Confounding the protectionist. Here's our theme to start us off. Government by the people or government versus the people? Wow, that's interesting. What's your personal philosophy? Is this truly a government by the people, or is it okay for the government to be completely in charge, and in doing so, they are versus the people? King versus the peasants. What's your philosophy? First question along these lines for your protectionist friend / enemy. Is this a government of the people, or do we accept whatever governance is handed down here in the United States of America? Perhaps it will answer, well, we're a government by the people, and right now the people are saying we need to get rid of semi-automatic firearms. This is a moment in time. The subject matter will change as the years go by, but that's what's current and on everybody's minds right now when we talk about people control. Okay, so that's currently what the people say right now. What about in the future? What if the people actually start saying and wanting something different than the government? Where do you fall? Is it a government by the people, as our forefathers founded this country, or is the government ultimately in charge? This is very important because I'm going to ask you some hard questions. Very hard questions. You ready? This one's not that difficult. I'm going to start this off. And again, no particular order. I might duplicate myself. It is what it is. I'll get to all the thoughts eventually. Do you believe in natural rights, or are they fictitious? Reference my video, The Minuteman Prerogative. I talk about that in depth in that video. I'm not going to do it here. No time. Natural rights are God-given. They are not bestowed by any government. They're given to you by God. They cannot be taken away by a government. So do you believe in that concept of natural rights, or do you think it's a bunch of bunk? That rights can be taken or bestowed by government. Again, this is a delineating question for your audience. If you ask them this and they immediately look at you crazy, like you're some radical, you know you're talking to someone who's part of that disarmament mob. The mob contagion, immune to reason. That you're some radical because how dare you, here you go again, talking about the Constitution, derivation of human rights. How dare you? Minuteman prerogative, look it up. A free man is always free to exercise his option of freedom, says I. Because he has natural rights. When we talk about the right of self-defense against bad guys, against people seeking to take away his life, his property, then he has a right to self-defense. Whoever that entity may be. Maybe it's a bad guy. Maybe it's a government. More hard truth. Ooh, more hard truth. Assuming disarmament worked. We're talking not just registration of so-called assault weapons. We're talking about complete disarmament. Assuming it worked, that all the civilian populace is disarmed, and let's say it provides slightly increased public safety. Or if you want to, I'll go along with this. Let's say it provides substantially increased public safety. It doesn't. I think I established that relatively well in part 2 of Greater Good. But let's say it does. Would tyranny be an acceptable price for this? Would an uprising ever be justified? Now we get to the heart of the matter, don't we? Now we get to what I was referencing to in part 2. We're talking about children's safety, kinda, not really. We're talking about disarming Americans and the repercussions of that event. When it comes, not if it comes, when it comes. What's going to be the repercussion for this society, this grand experiment we call the United States of America? Would an uprising ever be justified? Well, why don't you look these up in Wikipedia while you're at it. Tiananmen Square in China. Read about that. Hungary, 1956. The uprising against the communist invasion. Read about that. Brown shirts in Germany. I wonder if I can say this in German. Sturmabteilung. Sturmabteilung. Brown shirts in Germany. Read about that. When Hitler came to power, what went down? Who died? Who was designated as, here it comes, political enemies? The brown shirts in Germany. Would an uprising ever be justified? How about this? Well, I'll get to this next question here in a second. I hope I don't forget, but here we go. Does government involvement into our lives generally make things better or worse for us? Ask that to your protectionist buddy / enemy. Or if you're watching this, protectionist, I'm asking you, does the government make things better or worse? Well, the government gives us clean food and air. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. The government regulates us, constrains us, but it doesn't provide all the things we have. That comes from a capitalist society we have in the United States. It does it very well, by the way. Yes, there are a couple things the government can do and has done that are good. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying in its far-reaching power grab, it's generally going to play out badly for us. What does history show? Are governments usually very friendly to personal freedom or antagonistic to personal freedom? Again, this is a delineating question for your protectionist. If he says, oh, governments are great, you know where he's coming from. You know where he's going to drive to. And that is right to your house to get your guns. If not him, someone like him or someone he sent. Wow. These are hard questions. I love them. Do you support widespread electronic monitoring? Illegal or legal? I like that because there is illegal electronic monitoring going on right now, probably on this video, over a populace to make it safer. Does it? Does it make it safer? Cameras on every street corner, listening devices in our phones, who knows where our workplaces, our houses, recording everything that's said. You know what I say? If that's going down, we have a huge problem. Huge problem. Why are those even there? Because there is a entity of some sort or another that has designated political enemies. That's why. And they're monitoring their political enemies. Why? Because they want to get rid of them. In jail, destruction, murdering. Yeah, Look at the history of man. If we have that going on, I'm not saying it is or isn't to any degree in this video, but if it is, wow, look out. Does it make us safer? No, it doesn't. Reference the United Kingdom riots 2012. Cameras on every street corner. Where were the police? Outnumbered, cowering, not effective, not armed. Civilian populace, not armed, not able to quell the insurrection that happened in the United Kingdom. Oh, but it would have resulted in more deaths. No, it wouldn't have. You know, if you read the American Rifleman magazine by the National Rifle Association, there's a section in there called The Armed Citizen. Thousands of examples where guns were presented without a shot ever being fired that saved lives, that de-escalated violent crime. So don't roll in here with that stupid line of logic. Well, it just would have resulted in more lives lost. No, it wouldn't have. Next hard question. I love these questions. Do you think ethnic cleansing could ever happen here in the United States? How about religious persecution? Religious cleansing? Whoa. Well, heavens no, that would never happen here. Oh, really? How about Waco? The Branch Davidian compound. Weird religious sect? Okay, whatever. Who's to say your religious sect isn't weird? Who's to say that your way of worshiping your God or whoever isn't in line with the state? They don't like it. They're going to portray you as some weirdo. Maybe they're going to make up all kinds of lies about you, your religion, and the whole aim is to get rid of you. Because why? You're a political enemy. You represent a threat. Or it's get even time. Just flat out, get even time. Payback time. Did that happen down in Waco? Branch Davidian compound? You know, I'm not the expert, but it sure seems like that's how it went down. There was a lot of flack that came out from that. How the federal government handled that. They burnt the compound down. They killed a lot of people. Is that a shadow of things to come here in the U.S.? Could be. So ethnic cleansing, could it happen here? I say yes. Yeah, because I'm a realist. Again, we operate in the realistic environment, not a fantasy world. At least here in the Nutnfancy Project, our little sliver of the internet. If such an undertaking happened, I'm talking ethnic cleansing. So let's say, for whatever reason, a certain people or race is targeted. Whatever, black people, white people, red people. Doesn't matter. Let's just, for argument's sake, race B. They're targeted. Ethnic cleansing. Have we ever seen that, by the way, in modern history? Yeah, we have. If it happened, how would you respond? You, Mr. Protectionist. Unarmed Mr. Protectionist. You don't believe in firearms. You hate firearms. You think they represent a threat to society. You know where I'm going with this, right? So you're unarmed, and this kicks off. Just like it did in, yes, 1930s Germany. You knew where I was going with this, right? How did people respond then? How did the Jewish people respond then? Well, I've done a fair amount of reading on the subject, and I will tell you this. They responded with denial. They couldn't believe it was happening. They could not believe that people were getting carted off in train cars taken first to execution pits, later on to gas chambers because it was quicker, more cost effective, just more efficient. They couldn't believe it. Even when they found out, a lot of them would not bring themselves to fight against it. Not all of them, but some of them did. They're called the Jewish Underground. Here's some books for you to read. Go check out Fugitives of the Forest. The Belsky brothers, that's Bielski brothers, Beyond Courage, Jewish Resistance during the Holocaust, and then a book called The Remnant. And talk to me about how it will never, ever happen. Ethnic cleansing. Have high firepower weapons fought against tyranny and ethnic cleansing before? Machine guns, semi-automatic rifles? The answer is yes! When I read some of those books, I found it very intriguing that they valued greatly when they could capture an MP-38 and MP-40 from the Germans, a high firepower weapon. Why? Because it put them more on par with the Germans who were coming to cleanse their villages, who were out to kill them the Jewish resistance, their families, their women, their children. Yes, guns were saving lives in the 1930s, in World War II. We'll talk more about that. So like I was going to say, this other part of the question, would you have supported a public uprising against Hitler, Mr. Protectionist? Absolutely, I would have. You know, knowing what you know now, let me just put that caveat in there. So knowing what you know now, would you have supported a public uprising against Hitler? Absolutely, I would have. Really? With what? You already said you don't have guns. You don't think we should be armed. No one should have arms. Well, I didn't say that. I think just semi-autos. Well, you say that now, but in stages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, when other public shootings happen, you'll say, well, that wasn't far enough. The assault weapons ban didn't go far enough. We need to actually take all the registered weapons, just like we did in all those other countries, and take them away, confiscate them. That will truly make us safer. Okay, let's say you did that. We flash forward 10 years in the future. Some of this stuff kicks off because the people who are in power now aren't in power then. Things have really gone bad, but since you got rid of guns, you're not armed, and here you're telling me that you would have participated in the uprising against Hitler. I ask you, with what? How would you have resisted against Hitler? And by the way, talk is cheap. It's really cheap. Oh, I would have done this. I would have done that. No, you wouldn't have. You probably would have gotten on the train car with the rest of them. But assuming that you're brave enough to join the resistance, what do you want to fight with? Interesting questions, right? This drives to the heart of what we're talking about. We're not talking about children's safety. We're talking about the preservation of liberty, the preservation of freedom of choice, freedom of religion, freedom from ethnic cleansing, yes, backed up by the barrel of a rifle. But it's 2012, it's 2013, and beyond. How can a rifle do anything? Well, with a rifle, you can get a Jeep, a Humvee. You can get a heavy machine gun with that rifle. With a rifle, I can get a helicopter. Kind of like that. Wow. Heavy stuff, heavy stuff. So, to end it, government by the people or versus the people? Well, what we're seeing here, the beginnings of, at least in December 2012, soon to be 2013, we're seeing government versus the people. If you don't believe me, watch how this is implemented. Look out. I told you that on the 14th of December. Look out, gun owners. Another question before I leave this topic. Does societal responsibility trump personal responsibility? For the good of society, you need to do this, Mr. America. Forget your personal responsibility. For the good of society, for the greater good, remember we talked about that in part 2, you need to do this. Protectionist puppet strings, Marxist ideology. More in your face truth, puppet strings. If you think I'm just making this up, check out what Bill Clinton said. This is on MTV, April 19th, 1994, Bill Clinton. I guarantee you Obama and company believe the same. When personal freedom's being abused, you have to move to limit it. What? If the personal freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution inhibit government's ability to govern the people, strike out that word govern and put in control the people, we should look to limit those guarantees. Bam. Truth dart. Suck it. Next theme. Reality of the gun. It makes us safer. Doesn't threaten our safety, it makes us safer. Here come the questions. Why didn't Japan plan for an invasion of the United States? I'm not the expert on this, but I have done a fair amount of historical reading, somewhat versed in World War II. There's a lot of reasons for this. Yes, we were a huge economic power, large country. Could have Japan ever, I don't know, or any other country, Germany for that matter, mounted a successful invasion against us with the oceans, technology the way it was? Highly debatable. But have you ever heard this quote? We don't want to go to the United States, and I'm paraphrasing, because there is a rifle behind every blade of grass. That's why. When all the Americans are armed and they know how to use those arms, it's going to be extremely difficult for any invading force to do anything. Well, they're just rifles. They have tanks, they have helicopters, they have jets, they have napalm, cluster bombs. Like I said, with a rifle you can get other weapons. And it exacts a heavy, heavy toll on the invading force. It's historically proven. Small arms are effective at freedom's preservation. Next question. Does the military need guns? Ask your protectionist friend / enemy that. Well, of course they do. They're fighting other people that have guns. Aha! So you just blew out one of their key so-called logic points. Well, you're fighting an enemy that's also armed. Okay, so criminals will always be armed in the United States of America. We've pretty much established that with statistics. You're never going to take their guns away. You're going to enlarge the black market for firearms. You're going to disarm millions of law-abiding citizens that could actually preserve life, intervene in a mass murder situation. And you're saying the military needs guns because they fight an armed force. And now you somehow strike a different line of logic when it comes to a civilian situation. Do you see the hypocrisy? Is it advantageous we preserve a society proficient in them for our self-defense? This is kind of a second part of that question. In other words, we have a society of free people and they grow up with a firearms culture, much as we did, heck, all the way through the 1900s into the 2000s. Present day, a firearms culture, it's there, it's very reduced than from where it was. Is that advantageous when we go to war? Absolutely. That you have those boys who turn into soldiers who already know how to shoot. Go read the story about Carlos Hathcock, a southern boy who turned in to be one of the world's greatest snipers in Vietnam. He grew up shooting. Are we going to lose that by taking firearms away? That's just a little aside. Not really under the banner of making us safer. I guess it could be because we're preserving freedom. Next question. What were the predictions of concealed carry in Florida and other states? We're talking about how guns make us safer. Do you remember in part 2 I discussed this a little bit? Their predictions were like this. Dude, there's going to be gunfire in the streets. Traffic altercations are going to result in deaths. Same for the FFDO program, the Federal Flight Deck Officers program. People were dead. The protectionists, not people. You guys, the protectionists, were very much against pilots, commercial pilots flying with guns. Why? Well, that's just asking for trouble. You know, they're going to shoot themselves. They're going to have accidents. They're going to have their guns stolen from them. Here we are, I don't know, when was that implemented? Coming up on 10 years or so? Never hear anything about it, do you? Now, whether you're talking, concealed carry licenses, you're talking about the Federal Flight Deck Officers Program, there's always going to be probably a very tiny percentage of people who screw it up. It's an imperfect world. What can I tell you? It's always going to be that way. You can't change that. That's, again, living in utopia that does not exist. But by and large, 99.95% of the people are going to be upright, upstanding, and really contributing to a safer society. So the predictions were ridiculous. The predictions of concealed carry, they did not materialize. There's tons and tons of statistics out there that prove concealed carry reduces crime, and yet we have people who are still against it. Why? Because they just live in a state of fear against firearms. Not rational, it's just rage, hate against the firearm. Even though those very firearms are the things that have made them a free people. In our world wars, for instance. That M1 Garand I reviewed. One reason why we're a free people. Greatest battle implement ever devised, a firearm. So said Patton. Ooh, here we go. Guns make us safer, the reality of the gun. Hard question, Mr. Protectionist, Miss Protectionist. If your wife, I guess it's going to be Mr. Protectionist, if your wife or children were getting raped, brutalized, or murdered in front of you, would you attempt to intervene? Hard question. How? Would you try to talk or would you use force? So let's say someone breaks into your home. It's just you and your wife there. You come, let's say it's a 2-story house. You come downstairs and you see someone holding a knife to your wife's throat. She's on her back. He's on top of her. The door is wide open. Maybe this is a suspect fleeing from the police. Who knows? What are you going to do? And don't tell me it won't happen. Violent crime like this happens all the time in the most unsuspecting of places. It can and does happen. What are you going to do? You don't believe in firearms. You've already said that. So you don't have a firearm option. But let's just, for argument's sake, say you have a baseball bat in the corner. Knife at your wife's throat. She's probably, I don't know, seconds away from dying. What are you going to do? I'm going to stop right here and interject that reality has a great way of shattering the protectionist mindset and their world of artificiality. They have a whole perception of how the world is. It's a pink and blue padded nursery, that there's beautiful butterflies flying around, nobody hurts anybody, that somehow we can pass all these laws and restrictions and we will make it a pink and blue padded nursery. And then suddenly, bam, violent crime finds them instantaneously. And then I guarantee you no longer will they subscribe to progressive, democratic, Marxist, protectionist ways of thinking. They won't do it. So back to that room. What are you going to do? Ask your protectionist buddy this question and see what he says. If he's a human, he will say and admit truthfully that he's going to intervene and try to save his wife's life. Probably with that baseball bat. So, you're going to grab the baseball bat. What are you going to do with it? Well, I'm going to go up and just slam that guy's head as hard as I possibly can. Really. So you're admitting you're willing to bash someone's brain out, literally, to defend your loved ones. You got them. Logically, you got them. Finally, they're being honest with you. And protectionist, if you're still watching this video, be honest. Are you going to let your wife die or are you going to intervene? Well, I'm going to call the police. Great, call the police. They arrive 20 minutes after she's bled to death. And the guy has gotten away and probably stabbed you as he's going out the door with your belongings. Maybe he's a thief. It always cracks me up that people will say that. So I'll just bash his brains in. I'm like, well, why don't you have a gun? Why are you so anti-gun then if you admit that you're going to bash someone's brains out with a baseball bat? It's a weapon. Why don't you be prepared for violent crime that may find you? Doesn't mean you're violent. Doesn't mean you're bad. Doesn't mean you're going to go out and kill someone. And therein lies another lie of the protectionists. They think the gun itself corrupts an individual. The gun's present in a home, oh my gosh, bad things are going to happen. They'll throw out all types of made-up artificial statistics, how that gun is going to be more likely to be used against you in the home, because they roll in gangland violence, by the way. The statistics from gangs into that number. They didn't tell you that, did they? And they throw out these lies. House of Cards. Welcome to the protectionist. Okay, so you're going to kill the guy. Congratulations for being a human being, for defending your wife against a violent criminal. Who cares why he was doing it? Doesn't matter, he was doing it, and it will happen in the future. Again, reference the armed citizen in the National Rifle Association's magazine. There's thousands of examples of just such occurrences, but they're using firearms. Oftentimes, like I said, no shots fired. How's this for a question? In that situation, whether you're talking interpersonal or perhaps even on an international stage, is diplomacy always effective? Could you have talked your way out of that situation with that bad guy? I'm not going to say you can't, and I actually have advocated to my audience, if time permits, if the situation permits, we try to do just that. We talk our way out of the situation. De-escalate it. We don't want to take human lives. If there's a way to take it from here down to here with talking, with diplomacy, do it. But oftentimes you can't. Sandy Hook Elementary. Could you have talked your way out of that situation? With Lanza, the psychotic that killed all those kids, those teachers. No, I'm sure people were pleading for their lives. Don't do it, please, please. What have I done wrong? Bam, dead. Diplomacy is not always effective. Hasn't been between nations. It's not going to be any different with a madman, the criminally insane. We talked about in part one, when we're talking international affairs, the kellog-briand Pact, 1928, between Germany, U.S., and France, renouncing the use of war. A few years later, World War II kicked off. So how effective is that? Again, the protectionist approach, we won't have war, we're going to pass this, we're going to have agreements and diplomacy, we're going to pass the assault weapons ban, we're going to make these things illegal, and everything's going to be so awesome. Never mind the cost to freedom, which we talked about just a few minutes ago. No. Isolationist attitudes on an international scale are shattered and were shattered by reality. World War II. We were very isolationist back then. We did not want to get involved in the European War. We were dragged into it. Same with confronting violence on a personal level. You can be in denial. If you're really unlucky in life, you're going to have it come right to your doorstep, perhaps even literally. And we'll see how your protectionist preparations serve you and your family. You better pray your neighbor has a gun and that you haven't supported some legislation to take that gun away from your neighbor, because he just may save your ass. Can you envision a time you would need to harm someone for your personal safety? Did you ever defend yourself? Ever? In school fights, for example. Mr. Protectionist, I ask you. Well, no, I haven't, nor would I ever hurt anybody. Okay, I'm not going to say that there aren't people there that for whatever reason, they absolutely, positively refuse to take another human being's life. By the way, I'm that way. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I think all my audience members are the same way. We dread it. We'll do everything in our power to avoid it. But we are realists. We realize that violent crime can find us, that it can do bad things, just like it did in 1994 when I was stationed at Fairchild Air Force Base. Here comes the story. I'm really going to try to wrap this up in part 3, so I got to cruise. 1994, I came off what was called DNIF, that is duties not involving flying, on a Monday, 2 days after the shooting, or 3 days, I think it was 2 days after the shooting at Fairchild Air Force Base, where some freak had come there with a semi-automatic rifle and killed a bunch of people. He was actually put down by a security police officer with a round in the head fired from an M9 service pistol, 9mm. So once again, we see an immediate armed response stopped the killing. Dean Melberg, I think was the dude's name. He was reloading in the parking lot when that guy took him down. So he would have killed more people. But the SP, security policeman, did his job. Biking there on a bicycle, dropped to a knee, bam, bam, shot the guy. When I came off the NIF, I met with a Dr. Isaacson. I think that was his name. He's a flight surgeon, and he was an anti-gunner. I use that phrase because you know what it means. He hated guns. He said if there were no guns, this never would have happened. And I just sat there. He's a full bird colonel. Here I am, I think a junior captain at the time. But then he said something really interesting that always stuck with me. He said, Melberg came to my office, leveled the gun at me, and realized I was not the psychologist that had dishonorably discharged him. And by the way, that's all this was, is a vendetta against this dude. He walked out of my office, and then shortly thereafter started shooting people down the hall. I'm like, whoa. He's like, yeah, I heard pop-pops as a doctor talking, and I felt like I was in some type of dream. I couldn't believe it was happening. I go out of my office, and I look, and there's Melberg with his back to me, shooting people in the hallway. I see blood splattering, people's brains come flying out. This is what the doc's telling me. And you know what he said? Even after all that protectionist nonsense he had laid upon me, he goes, I wished I would have had a gun because I could have taken him out right then and there. But it was a federal military installation. No one's allowed to have a gun except duty officers like the security policemen. So once again we see, just like in all these mass shootings, that time is critical. We need an immediate armed response. Perhaps in that day, had the base commander said, hey, you know what? Concealed carry permit holders in Spokane, Washington, Fairchild Air Force Base, bring your guns on board. Don't care. Don't have an accident. You're personally responsible for that. Maybe, just maybe, someone would have had a gun and saved more people that day at Fairchild Air Force Base. Have you ever defended yourself? Do you ever see a situation where you would do that? Hard questions, but welcome to reality. If guns make our society more dangerous, shouldn't 2-day long gun shows be the most dangerous place on earth? Absolutely. Is everybody that enters that gun show mentally stable? No. Statistically speaking, there's no way that could be. I'm sure some kooks enter gun shows. And yet we don't ever hear of shootings at gun shows, do we? That's because everybody is armed. Well, technically, I mean, there's not ammunition in the guns. At a gun show, you're actually pretty much required to unload your gun. But you've never heard of a mass shooting at a gun show, have you? This drives to the point that people say guns make us unsafe. They threaten our safety. Nonsense. They don't. Gun show's a perfect example. Wherever there's a lot of guns, people are really armed, and that information has been widespread, you won't have any mass shootings. Again, going back to the armed teachers principle. Arm up the teachers, train them, or they train themselves. Just open up concealed carry permit holding in the schools. Hey teacher, gym teacher, English teacher, math teacher in 4th grade, 5th grade, 3rd grade, 7th grade, you can be armed. Hey, news media, check this out. Our junior high schools, our high schools, our colleges, there's all kinds of guns in there. But they're being held by good people. Tell me what happens to your mass shootings. They're gone. Is that on the table, protectionist? Are you talking about that? No. Unfreaking believable. An armed society is a polite society and a safe society, Kennesaw, Georgia. Do you generally trust or distrust lawful gun owners? Protectionist. Have or do guns prevent violence? We've talked about this already. Again, Nick Melly, that's a recent example in the Oregon Mall. He drew his Glock, stopped the killing. Got to move on. Next topic. By the way, I hope you like that. That was reality of the gun. They do make us safer. Next one. Politicians, celebrities used armed protection, but you can't. Ooh, that's good. Would someone ever attempt to hurt a public official like the president? If so, do they need protection? How do they get this protection? Interesting question. So here we have, for instance, the President of the United States. Are people out there that could hurt him? Absolutely. No one's going to answer that question in the negative. No way. They're going to say, yeah, of course, there's kooks out there. President Reagan was shot by a kook, right? Hinckley. Okay, so Secret Service, how do they protect the president? With firearms. Again, we get back to that example that I talked about with the military. Why does the military need firearms, amongst other weapons? Because the bad guys have them. Well, can't you pass a pact like the kellog-briand pact that your enemy won't use firearms, that you can just talk it out? No, you can't. You can't do that with individuals either. There could be someone showing up to cause harm to that public official. Could anyone, that being established, that firearms protect the President of the United States and actually all types of public officials, they do every day, how are you any different? As a civilian citizen, the police are going to do it, which are 20 minutes away, half hour away. They're not going to do that. Let's deal in reality, okay? Not utopia. Are you any less important than the president? How about those kids in Connecticut? Were they? There weren't any guns nearby that day. That's why so many died. 20 children, 6 adults? Mowed down in the gun-free zone. Gun-free death pay. Here's what I say. If citizens can't use, for now, semi-automatic firearms, and neither can those individuals which protect the president. Why should it be any better? No better, no worse. Disarm the Secret Service to the level. Can't have magazines over 10 rounds, and guess what? Secret Service can't have magazines over 10 rounds. Heck, while we're at it, let's say the military too. Because you're establishing a limit on firearms. You don't need this protection. We'll talk more about that. Got to cruise. Magazine and weapons limitations should apply to all LE as well. Sheriff Department, state police, federal law enforcement. Hey guys, you can't use black rifles anymore, AR-15s, you got to register them. Oh, by the way, we're going to confiscate them later. Great. Neither can law enforcement. That's what I say. Should guns protect our presidents, senators, representatives, movie stars, our children, you? Yeah, they do all the former. Talk about hypocrisy. Dianne Feinstein carried a pistol, probably still does, in San Francisco. And now she's foaming at the mouth trying to disarm you. saying that you don't have the right to defend your family, your babies, your children, your dogs, your property. Well, she's not saying that, Nutnfancy. She's just saying semi-automatic firearms. No, she's not. That's round 1. Rounds 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are soon to follow. If politicians and movie stars have the right to self-defense, so do I, by whatever means I choose. By the way, I mentioned the word need. Be careful if you sign off on that. Well, do you need a magazine over 10 rounds? Do you need a semi-automatic firearm? Thus is framed the discussion right now in December 2012. In the years, perhaps even the months to follow, do you need a bolt-action rifle? Do you need a telescopic sight? And do not, I repeat, do not frame your defense of the Second Amendment, actually all the Bill of Rights for that matter, with what I will call the sporting defense, the hunting defense. Who cares about that? It's defense against bad guys, defense against the government, defense against tyranny. That's where you place the argument and make them address that argument. As the bills were being written right now, they're like, well, for sporting purposes, you don't need this. We're not talking about sporting purposes. We're talking about defending against, I don't know, like we said, ethnic cleansing, tyranny. I need all the firepower I can get. We get back to that. Is it a government by the people? Do you trust in the people as a whole, or do you not trust in the people? If you don't trust in the people, you trust more in the government, and then we're talking about a huge issue. And to me, that's Marxist. It's not American. We don't trust Americans. Americans can't be trusted. The government we do trust. Is that what the protectionists say? Do you need 4,000 calories a day? Do you need an iPhone that can receive and spread seditious speech? Told you I had some in-your-face truth. There's another one. Do you need a car that drives over 65 miles an hour? Do you need a house with more than 2 rooms? Do you need a window in each room? Other people don't have windows in their rooms. Why should you have a window? Do you need a job earning over $35,000 a year? It's not fair. Do you need access to public lands? Do you need the internet? Do you need computers? And on and on and on we go with that need discussion. Beware of the word need. As soon as you sign off on that, you're done. You're a peasant to the state when you say, yeah, do they really need that? Well, guess what? It might be firearms in this discussion. It might be the First Amendment in the next discussion. Do you need to blog? Who says you have the right to blog? Well, the Constitution is. Oh, what Constitution? The one we overturned, starting with the Second Amendment? That Constitution, that Bill of Rights? The one that you previously supported? No, you don't need those things. We'll decide what you need and what you don't need. The need speech is pure Marxism. If you don't believe me, go read his writings. Wikipedia it. It's framed for, again, the greater good. It's framed for the state. Controlled peasant. Hey, if politicians and celebrities, and there's all kinds of celebrities that carry guns, that have armed security guards, all kinds, if they're armed, then you have the right to be armed. The very people that contribute millions to stripping you of your self-defense are carrying weapons as we speak. The hypocrisy of the protectionist, bam. If you can't have it, neither should they. That's what I say. By the way, semi-autos right now are the results, I thought I'd mention this really briefly, of a lot of Second Amendment infringement already. What do you mean, Nutnfancy? Well, what I mean is we've had all types of gun control enacted upon us. This is almost the last straw, the latest so-called assault weapons ban. Should be impossible what happened because all the gun laws in place, right? We were promised with the passage of each of these gun laws that gun violence would come to an end. And yet you see them driving to the hoop with yet some more very people-controlling legislation. The promises of a safer society, the end of violence, never materialized, and it won't with this passage either. And they're going to come back for more. They don't regroup and say, oh, wow, this whole gun control thing, it's not working. We were wrong. Those guys were right. They're freedom guys. Hate to admit it, but they were right. They'll never say that. They're going to say we haven't gone far enough. So that gun you were stupid enough to register, they're coming for now. Now it's controlled as an NFA firearm. You're on a database, not your 4473 did that, but your registration did that. Here they come, bam, to make society safer. No, it still won't work. And we've had a lot happen already. I mean, what was it? Firearms Act in 1934 was it in response to gangster violence. Gun Control Act 1968, part of President Johnson's Great Society in response to the Kennedy assassinations. That's how we got GCA of 1968. I can't mail order a gun anymore. I have to go through an FFL. GCA 1968. When they passed that, they had all kinds of promises how this would bring to pass all types of proposed safety. McClure-Volkmer Act, passed in 1986. Domestic, that by the way, outlawed civilian possession of machine guns. That make it safer? I don't think so. Domestic violence offender gun ban. The Lautenberg Amendment, prohibiting anyone previously convicted of a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence from shipment, transport, ownership, and use of guns and ammunition, and on the list goes. Now we're relegated to semi-autos. Hey, Nutnfancy, would you like a machine gun? Yeah, I would. Illegal, though. By the NFA 1934. We'll talk more about those machine guns before I end the video, and I got to cruise. Speaking of which, next theme. You guys are going to love this one. Unenforceable laws will lead to more weaponry. Not less, more weaponry. Hey, you know, if we did not have millions and millions and millions of semi-automatic rifles in the world, let's say we could wave the magic wand, maybe we could pass this law, maybe, just maybe, we couldn't somehow affect violent crime in the United States. I still say no, because criminals will always have guns. They always have. If not, they'll have other destructive devices to do their evil with. But let's say they weren't in possession. Okay. But that's fantasy. It's utopia. It's not the way it is. We have millions and millions of semi-automatic rifles out there. You're not going to get rid of them. Tomorrow you pass a law and they're completely illegal. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to vanish? You think everyone's going to turn them in? No. Do you think everybody in the state of California did that when they passed all their asinine gun laws? No. They're still there. Guarantee you they're still there. They'll come out of the woodwork in any extended WROL situation. Boom. There you have it. Question, are gun laws effective? How many do we have already? Do criminals obey them? How many were ignored and broken in the Connecticut shooting? Well, all kinds. Theft, illegal possession by mentally unstable person, assault with a deadly weapon, multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, posted gun-free zone, and more. All kinds of laws were broken by Lanza when he shot those kids. Gun laws don't work. What would the goal of the AWB be? I think we kind of mentioned this in part 2. Well, it's to get guns out of the hands of criminals. It's ineffective. This is a really important point. I want you to listen to this. Okay, so you said they're to get guns out of the hands of criminals. But I'm not a criminal, right, Mr. Protectionist? And oftentimes they'll say this. They're like, you're right, you're not. We don't worry about you. We worry about the criminal. But because you have the gun, we're afraid that it may be stolen or taken from you and it will be used in a crime. Oh, really? That's an interesting line of logic, and it's very easily refuted, kind of like the following. Well, there's all kinds of dangerous things in this society that are illegal for a civilian to possess that can be stolen, raided, gained. There's a guy that stole a tank, drove it around, crushed all kinds of cars and stuff. I forget, I think he killed some people too. You can disarm the police, the military, gain their weapons. You can raid armories with bows and arrows, other improvised weaponry, and then get those machine guns and semi-automatic rifles anyhow. So where's your line of thought there? Well, it would reduce it. No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. And even if it did, at what cost? Again, where's your safety net for the government? You get rid of that? We already talked about this. Your safety net is gone. We don't worry about you. You're not the problem, but we're worried about those guns in circulation. They can be stolen from you. So I'm not a bad guy and I'm not to be feared? No, you're not. We don't worry about you. They will say this all the time. You may see people in comments saying this. We're just worried about the guns. They hate the gun. Even though that's what makes them a free people. Even though that's what the police carry. Even though that's what the Secret Service carries to protect the president. I know, hypocrisy. So here we go. So what do you do if I'm in compliance with the assault weapons ban? So I decide not to obey it. A gun owner decides not to obey it. Mr. Protectionist, what do you do with that individual? Here's their response. We're going to throw you in jail. I support that. But wait a minute, you just told me I'm not the bad guy. So what if I have my gun? Yeah, but you still have it, and it's the new groupthink. It's the new America. Just like we treat machine guns, semi-automatics are going to be looked at the same way. That's a truth, by the way. And if you don't think that's not how it's going to go down, you need to wake up. The 1934 NFA, National Firearms Act, if you're caught with a machine gun nowadays, did they just ignore it? Or do they treat it very seriously? Oh, someone was found with a machine gun. We need to throw him in jail. They were found with an SBR. Throw them in jail. They are dangerous to the society, and for the greater good, we're going to lock them up. That's how semi-autos are going to be with this AWB. Bam. Even though they just said we're not the bad guys, we're not to be feared, right? We don't worry about you guys. Right. How effective has the war on drugs been? How much money has been spent on it? You're getting ready to launch a war on semi-automatic rifles and later on all the other types of rifles. Millions and millions of dollars have been spent on the elimination of drugs and to no avail. Completely failed. How's it going to be any different with firearms? It's actually going to be worse because drugs are not constitutionally protected. That if you were to jail somebody, he has a constitutional defense. You don't have a constitutional right to get high, to have heroin, crack, meth, whatever. Not written in the Constitution. Your firearm is. They're going to have a hard time explaining that one away. You're going to have some very smart lawyers, well-funded lawyers, fighting against that. Watch what happens. Watch what happens. How effective would laws be on disarming criminals, mentally deranged, and the suicidal? Have they been in the past? So you want to pass this all-comprehensive assault weapons ban. How effective is it going to be? Not too. I got a cruise. So much to talk about. Has Mexico been able to reduce their violent crime with their stringent gun laws? No. In fact, U.S. citizens fear going to Mexico. In Mexico, private citizens are generally restricted to semi-automatic handguns or revolvers with .380 caliber or less. Rifles no greater than .22 in caliber. Wow. Anything bigger is considered exclusive use of the military, strictly forbidden for civilian possession, and yet they have rampant murdering going on in Mexico. Another glaring example of failure of gun laws. People control. Can you eliminate the black market for weaponry? No. By a comprehensive so-called assault weapons ban, you will make it larger. Larger. That the black market will actually swell in ranks. And actually, so will machine guns. Did you ever think of that? Because if you attach a felony to the mere possession of a semi-automatic rifle, I told you I was going to represent the views of my viewers in this series, and I have been doing that all along. I'm going to point it out again. But I guarantee you there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people that will say, you know what? That's a felony to own a semi-automatic Ruger 1022? Not registering it, going to convert it to full auto. Bam, now you got more machine guns. So it has exactly the opposite effect. So Mr. Protectionist, you don't want more full automatic weapons in society, do you? No, I don't. Then you better fight against the assault weapons ban because that's practically how it's going to go down. The way it's being written, the way it's being talked about right now. Does the mere presence of guns create crime? No, we talked about that in the gun show example. It's ridiculous. Talked about that a lot. If your neighbor is armed, does that threaten you? Why? What are the percentages of violent crime by legal purchasers of firearms? Minuscule. How about the insane, the criminal? How do you propose to force him to obey your assault weapons ban? So you have a neighbor, he's armed. How do you force him to obey? Should you, Mr. Protectionist? Well, yeah, we do. Well, you just said he's not the problem. He's been keeping you safe, but now you want to go and disarm him. So I guess we're down to the root of what you're really after, and that is people control, isn't it? That is a much larger and more dangerous issue. We've talked about it already. Would you support a law that puts... Sorry, I talked about that. Can you control the I love this, proliferation of illegal, so-called dangerous things in society? Even if you could, at what long-term societal cost would that come? There's no guarantee for all the other rights once you lose the Second Amendment. Can you control the proliferation of dangerous things in a society? Let's take prisons, for example. Here we have a very closed society, completely under the control of the government. Federal prison, state prison, and yet within those walls are all kinds of weapons. Shivs, drugs, cigarettes, contraband of every sort and description. They cannot control it in a prison. In an enclave of a prison, are they going to be able to control it in society? Absolutely not. What they will do is empower the criminally insane, the murderers. It's fact. Here's a good one. Would you support handcuffing of your neighbor, his family, while a detailed search was conducted for illegal weaponry? Ask that to your protectionist friend. Would you support giving information to expedite this process? The moment the idea is admitted into our society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, and that there is not a force of law and public justice to protect it, anarchy and tyranny will commence. Property must be secured, or liberty cannot exist. That is John Adams, one of our founding fathers, Works, chapter 6, verses 8 and 9. Tyranny will commence, is what John Adams said. The right of the people to be secure against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. The Sixth Amendment. Do you think our forefathers had some foresight in all these issues? Yeah, they did. Because they just went through them themselves. Again, a lot of blood was spilt to make this country a possibility by very brave individuals that fought against tyranny. Now, with all the revision going on in history, you're hearing a lot of other stuff, but that is not how it went down. We have the Constitution as an outgrowth of these individuals, these people who fought. Some died creating this country, this freedom that you and I right now are enjoying. And now it's at risk. And now idiotic people are willing to piss it away, and it will not be restored easily. It will not. Would you support entire disarmament of the U.S. even if it resulted in many gun battles with LE and civilians killed, perhaps destabilizing the country? I just talked about that. If so, is preventing death and violence really your goal? In part 2, I really hammered that. You said, no, I'm all for the, preventing the loss of life, children's lives, innocent people's lives. Well, here you may pass something that as it is attempted to be enforced as the years go by, you could have thousands of people die because of it. Are you really for the loss of life? Are you really about the establishment of a certain agenda? People control. I ask you that. Now, I don't know much about this, but there's something called the sovereign movement. Have you ever heard of that? Sovereign movement. These are people who don't believe in the current United States government, and they don't believe in having licenses. They don't believe in having license plates on their cars. There are examples when they have shot and killed law enforcement officers. It happened in 2010 in Arkansas. There was dudes called Jerry and Joe Kane. They were sovereigns. They killed several police officers when they got pulled over, and they thought they were being harassed. Do you think the sovereign movement is going to grow larger or smaller with the passage of the AWB? I'm a reporter. I'm reporting the facts. What do you think? No, I'm not part of that movement, but I know a little bit about it. What do you think? It's going to be enlarged or weakened when you declare millions of United States citizens as felons for no reason? These are some big issues. Think wisely on how you approach them. We've never seen this in the history of the United States. I got to wrap it up. Summary. The difference between you and I, TMPers, and yourself, Mr. Protectionist, is our interpretation of reality. Utopia versus reality. You think there is no evil in the world, just misguided victims of circumstance. I wrote this, by the way, when I was like, middle of the night, I woke up, I was like, I gotta write this down. You believe the people who perpetrate these crimes should be coddled and healed. You seek out their tormentor, whom you designate, and you seek justice against them. We believe and recognize evil. We believe it exists. It is its own monster of its own creation, and it cannot be reasoned with. It will seek out and succeed in the destructions of others unless good people intervene. Yes, that usually means an armed response. The good meets force with force, and in doing so, it saves lives. Disarming good further empowers evil, and that is your desire. You, no matter what the facts of history, think your safe society is possible only with further government involvement and intrusion. Welcome to Germany, the burning of the Reichstag, 1933. That's what you're about. Evil distorts, attacks, and manipulates truth. That's what you're seeing with this so-called everything on the table discussion about the assault weapons ban. It will seek to hide the facts, mislead, pervert the facts, and convince the unsuspecting. That's happening by the millions. This has always been so, and it is now. Truth is rejected when it requires commitment, courage, and resolve. The few that will stand up and proclaim it will be attacked by the mobbers, by the mob contagion, the disarmament mob. But they will sway some, maybe this video will sway some, and change the tide to preserve what I call a true state of security and freedom. If we are not the keepers of this freedom that you and I have inherited, then who? This is serious stuff. This is the Nutnfancy Project. And for the greater good, we should remain an armed people. And in doing so, we'll be a safer people, protecting the freedoms of future generations. See ya.